Hello, welcome to OntargIT channel. My name is Andrew and today I will present the functionality of Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations and describe how this product can be used for financial and project management of an IT company. Dynamics 365 has all necessary tools for financial management of an IT company. In particular, Project Management and Accounting module provides tools for project management and financial accounting of projects according to a company's accounting policy. Accounts receivable and accounts payable modules allow to maintain customers and vendors, contracts, payment terms, and finally accounting for accounts receivable and payable and analysis of outstanding balances. Expense Management module allows to create and review expense requests, expense reports, and pay compensation to employees. Budgeting module provides execution of a budgeting process and perform budgetary control based on the approved budget. Fixed Assets module keeps all necessary details for a company's tangible and intangible assets and allows you to have multiple accounting books per each asset to meet financial and tax accounting requirements. General Ledger ensures that all of your transactions are posted correctly according to your chart of accounts and financial dimensions in order to provide financial reporting and analysis. And finally, a set of features for intercompany processes and financial consolidation gives an international IT company the possibility to generate a package of consolidated financial statements. Project Management and Accounting allows you to manage the entire life cycle of a project. At the stage of project initiation or a pre-sale stage, you can create so-called project quotations, which include an estimate of the need for labor resources and other costs, and accordingly prepare a calculation of the amount of a contract. If the proposal is accepted by the client, the corresponding contract and project or several projects are created in the system and the project budget is being approved. During the implementation of the project, relevant costs are registered, like man-hours, business trips, procurement of goods and services. Also, the system allows to issue prepayment invoices, intermediate and final invoices to a customer. Project manager and other persons are able to analyze both intermediate forecasts and the final financial result of a project. So, when the contract with the client is signed or the start of work is agreed, you can create a corresponding contract card in the system, as well as a project or multiple projects linked to this contract. Projects can be either fixed price or time and material. At the contract level, you can set up the frequency of invoicing. For example, it can be weekly, monthly invoices or upon completion of a project or completion of its milestone. Payment terms are also specified at the contract level. For example, net 10 means payment within 10 days after the invoice is issued. Accordingly, when issuing an invoice, the system applies the payment term automatically, which is then used to analyze overdue debts. For a fixed price project, you can create milestones, thereby indicating the stages of work and intermediate invoices that must be issued to the customer upon completion of a particular stage. For time and material contracts, you can set up sales rates in the system, and there are several dimensions how you can set up them. First of all, you can just set up a blended rate for all of your specialists. Another option, you can set up sales rates, for example, per type of work, type of services. For example, one sales rate for project managers, another for developers, and so on. Another option is to set up sales rates per project roles, including the level of experience. For example, you can have one rate for project management middle, another for project management senior, C# developer middle, C# developer senior, and so on and so on. And another option, you also can set up sales rate per each particular specialist. So the sales rate setup is quite flexible. And accordingly, in the future, when the actual timesheets of specialists are registered in the system, it automatically determines the price for which the relevant services should be sold to the client. These settings makes it possible to generate an invoice automatically, as well as predict revenue in future periods based on the forecast of remaining hours. Also in the system, we can set the cost rates of specialists, that is the cost of work per hour. Similar to sales rates, cost rates also can be configured with different level of details. It can be either an individual rate for an employee or a rate per project role, taking into account the level of seniority, or a more general rate by type of services. Cost rates are set up taking into account their effective date. Cost rates are used both for calculating the project budget or forecast and for calculation of the actual cost of the project. You can create a work breakdown structure for a project with a list of tasks, start and end dates, and required number of hours per each task, and specify roles of employees who perform these tasks. Work breakdown structure can be integrated with Microsoft Project, that is, you can open it in Microsoft Project, update it, and it will be published directly into ERP system. Integration with other task management systems such as Jira, Azure DevOps, and other is also possible using modern integration technologies provided by the Dynamics 365 platform. After a project is created, we can actually start preparation of a project budget. A project budget can include both labor costs and other costs such as, for example, outsourcing, travel costs, purchase of goods or subscriptions, equipment, and other costs. Revenue and expenses of the project can be entered with different level of details. Labor costs can be detailed by type of work, project roles, or particular employees. As for the goods and other equipment, this cost can be planned by items. Other expenses are planned by expense categories, for example, tickets, hotel, per diem, taxi, and so on. You can have several versions of a budget for a project. For example, you may have first of all an initial budget. Then, for example, after the review of a resource manager or some other factors, you may have an update of a budget. And also there is possibility that during the implementation of a project, the scope of work will be changed and you will need to update the budget again. So the system allows you to track all changes to budgets and keep them as separate versions, and further you will be able to compare them. In this example, which you now see on the screen, we have the original version of the budget, which is called original budget. Here we have an estimate of the number of hours and preliminary allocation of roles that will perform the services. And then below you can see a new version, which is called Update 1, where we keep the updated version of the budget. All versions of the budget are stored in the system, and as a result, we have the ability to track these changes. Right now on the screen you can see an example of a dashboard where you can view and compare versions of the project budgets. I would also like to say a few words about the Excel add-in for integration with Dynamics 365. This tool allows you to work with ERP system data directly from the Excel interface in a very convenient way. For example, you can open the project budget in Excel, press refresh button, and the current data from ERP is immediately downloaded to Excel. You can then edit this data directly in Excel and then press the publish button directly from the Excel interface, and then the updated values are immediately uploaded to the ERP system. This way you can work both with budgets or other data of the ERP system. Next part of the presentation is about registering of actual costs for projects and calculation of revenue. And first topic here is about actual time tracking. In the system, there is a timesheet functionality which allows every employee to create his timesheet for a certain period, allocate hours per projects or project tasks. And then we also have possibility to send this timesheet for approval. We can configure approval workflows, for example, to approve the timesheet by a project manager or possibly by another project participant. Dynamics 365 also can be integrated with third-party systems like Jira, Azure DevOps or other systems and receive the actual time tracking from them. During the posting of a timesheet, Dynamics automatically calculates the cost of the tracking according to the configured cost rates. And as I said earlier, the system defines cost rates by categories of work, roles, or if necessary, by each specific employee. Therefore, during the posting, the system calculates the cost and performs the corresponding transactions in both managerial and financial accounting. In Dynamics, we have the ability to configure calculation of overheads. Overhead costs can be calculated either as a percentage of the man-hour costs or as a fixed hourly rate. Now on the screen you can see an example of setup for vacation overhead, which is 7% of wages. Bench overhead and workplace overhead is set as 15 cents per hour. The structure of applied overheads by category is stored in the system, so later you can analyze the structure of expenses in detail and see separately how much is vacation, how much is bench and workplace costs were charged to the project. Overheads costs are automatically calculated not only for actual labor hours, but also for hours planned in the future. So the project budget and forecast also have calculated overhead costs. Dynamics 365 has an expense management module. This module allows you to create expense requisitions, which allow you to pre-approve expenses before they are actually incurred. And after a business trip or other use of funds, you can create an expense report. Expenses from the expense report can be associated with a project, and if necessary, they can be approved by a respective project manager or other project participants. You can also create a purchase requisition or a purchase order for a project. For example, it can be some special subscriptions or equipment that is needed specifically for implementation of a project. Thus, the costs of such items are associated with a project, and for time and material projects, they can be included in the customer invoice. Also, if necessary, preventive budget control can be activated for a project. In this case, the system checks whether the project budget is sufficient for a corresponding item, and if the budget is exceeded, it is possible to either block further processing of the purchase or escalate the approval process for such a purchase. Dynamics 365 has all necessary capabilities to correctly recognize revenue and costs for a project, including full compliance with the standard IFRS 15. Depending on the essential terms of a contract, we can set up revenue to be recognized over time or at a point in time. For a fixed price project, the system automatically calculates percentage of completion of the project and calculates revenue and contract assets accordingly. The calculation of the project completion percentage can be based on both the number of resources, so number of man-hours, or the cost of resources spent, depending on the accounting policy chosen by a company. Both time and material and fixed price project can be configured to recognize revenue at a point in time. It means that costs are first accumulated on the balance sheet and they are transferred to P&L together with revenues at the moment when a client confirms the value of the accepted works. When creating a project, we can specify the method of revenue recognition, and then during the project implementation, all financial transactions are calculated and posted automatically according to the configured policy. In the system, there is a convenient functionality for invoicing a client for a project. For time and material projects, invoice is automatically filled in with all actual transactions that are marked as billable and that were not invoiced in previous periods, which is tracked by the system itself. For example, certain costs of the project should not be compensated by the client, and accordingly we can classify them as non-billable so that they do not get into the invoice. Also, the system automatically fills in the sales rates according to the conditions that were configured at the stage of contract creation. If necessary, it is possible to correct sales rates, add or remove transactions from the invoice. Also, other expenses are added to the invoice, such as travel, compensation for equipment, etc. And they can be seen in the draft invoice on a separate tab, which is called Expenses. The system can also generate prepayment invoices. In this case, when creating an invoice for the completed work, the system will automatically offer to settle prepayment in order to immediately reduce the amount to be paid by the client and include this information in the printout of the invoice. And for a fixed price project, the system creates an invoice according to the milestones that were entered into the system at the start of the project. Like most of the other documents, an invoice has its own approval route. In this route, we can set up the sequence of steps in invoice review and assign each step to a responsible person or role. In this example, which you now see on the screen, the invoice is first sent to a project manager for approval. Then it is checked whether there is a discount in the invoice, and if there is a discount, an invoice is additionally assigned to CFO for approval. Otherwise, this step is skipped. And finally, the invoice is sent to a billing manager who finally confirms it. After that, the system can automatically post this invoice, and even without the user's participation, it can create a printed form of the invoice and send it to the client by email or in another way. During implementation of a project, the project manager can prepare intermediate forecast for a project, where he can put his estimation of the remaining effort, remaining resources to finalize the project. And using the standard reports and dashboards from the project and management and accounting module, you can analyze this data, compare actuals to budget, or compare actuals plus forecast versus budget. The system also monitors the so-called commitments. For example, if a purchase request was previously created for a project, but it has not yet been processed, the corresponding amounts are classified as commitments and are taken into account as future costs when analyzing the budget versus actual or budget versus forecast for this project. One of convenient ways to analyze project indicators is the pre-built Power BI dashboard project management, which allows you to compare budget versus actuals with the required level of details, either by categories of revenue and expenses or by roles of employees and in other dimensions. In addition, in the dashboard, you will be able to see the forecast for the project, taking into account the actual costs, commitments, and other costs that are planned but not yet incurred. Analytics on resource utilization of projects are also available in the project management dashboard. The system provides a so-called credit and collections module, which has a set of tools for analyzing overdue invoices, taking into account the number of days overdue, the status of the debt, for example, disputed, promised to pay, failed on promise to pay, and so on, as well as the ability to create tasks for the account managers to perform certain debt collection activities. Also, the system has so-called financial insights functionality, which can predict customer debt payment using machine learning algorithms that take into account the customer's transaction history and other factors. Cashflow forecasting tool of Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations collects data from various sources in order to forecast the future cash flow. One of the sources for calculation the cash flow forecast is a project's budget for projects that have not yet started, or the project forecast for projects that is already in process. That is, the system collects all uninvoiced expenses, future milestones, as well as intermediate forecasts of project, and based on all this data, it can create a forecast of future cash inflows and outflows. The system also analyzes the current unpaid documents of the accounts payable and accounts receivable modules, taking into account their due dates. In addition, other electronic documents are taken into account that will affect the cash flow. For example, it can be unprocessed purchase requisition or not finalized purchase orders with respect to payment terms of relevant documents. Also, the company's budget can be used for forecast cash flow for certain items. For example, in order to forecast payments of wages, the system can take a P&L budget or forecast for wages expenses. So, in such a way, the system collects information from various sources and creates a forecast of cash flow, which can be presented either in the form of a table or a graph or a dashboard, as you can see now on the screen. It is also important to note that Dynamics for Finance has so-called Financial Insights tool, which allows you to forecast cash flow more precisely, taking into account the history of transactions with certain counterparties, as well as create snapshots of forecasts and later compare them with the actual cash flow. Another dashboard that you can find in the system is the Financial Analysis for All Companies dashboard. It allows you to see all the key financial indicators of a company or a group of companies in a convenient way. You can compare the budget with actuals while choosing the required level of details, as well as using filters to add or remove certain companies or analytics from the calculation, or see the general consolidated picture for the entire group of companies. Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations has all necessary capabilities for organizations which have multiple legal entities in different countries. You can keep your local financial accounting in the system according to the local legislation and perform financial consolidation according to corporate chart of accounts in a reporting currency. That's all for today. Thank you for attention. Please follow our social media in Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube channel. See you again.